July 1940. Toledo, Ohio. The Willis Overland factory floor. The metal still smelled of peacetime. Assembly lines that once built civilian sedans now sat silent, waiting. In a corner office overlooking the Maumee River, a small, boxy prototype sat on wooden blocks. 4 wheels. Flat hood. No doors. No roof. 70 inches wide. 134 inches long. It looked like something a child might draw if asked to sketch a car from memory. Carl Probst, freelance automotive engineer, stared at the thing he'd designed in just 48 hours. The U.S. Army had given him an impossible specification, a quarter-ton reconnaissance vehicle. Maximum weight, 1,300 pounds. Maximum cost, $739 per unit. Delivery of prototype, 49 days. It was July. Europe was burning. France had fallen. Britain stood alone. And America, still neutral, still unprepared, needed a miracle vehicle that could be mass-produced faster than any military equipment in history. Captain Robert Howie, U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, walked around the prototype 3 times. "It looks," he said, his voice flat with skepticism, "like a motorized wheelbarrow." The German General Staff would have agreed. In Berlin, August 1940, Wehrmacht intelligence had obtained photographs of early Jeep prototypes through diplomatic channels. The assessment, filed in Oberkommando der Wehrmacht records, was dismissive, Amerikanisch Aufklärungsfahrzeug, primitive, unbewaffnet, anfällig. American reconnaissance vehicle, primitive, unarmed, vulnerable. General George Thomas, head of the War Economy and Armaments Office, had seen the specifications. A vehicle that weighed less than a German motorcycle with sidecar. An engine producing only 60 horsepower. Ground clearance of just 8.75 inches. Top speed of 65 miles per hour on flat roads. Slower than a Kübelwagen, slower than a Kettenkrad, certainly slower than anything worth Germany's industrial attention. The Americans, one report concluded, continue to approach modern warfare with the industrial philosophy of Henry Ford. Mass production over engineering excellence. Quantity over quality. They will learn, as France learned, that wars are won by superior machines operated by superior men. But what Thomas and his analysts couldn't see, what nobody could see in those early specifications, was hiding in plain sight. The Jeep's engine was a 134.2 cubic inch L-head 4-cylinder. Unremarkable. The transmission was a 3-speed manual with a 2-speed transfer case. Standard. The chassis was ladder frame construction. Basic. But the devil, as they say, lived in the details they dismissed as irrelevant. Ground clearance, 8.75 inches. Meaningless on paper. Crucial in the mud of Normandy, the snow of Bastogne, the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima. Wheelbase, 80 inches. Too short, the Germans thought, for stability. Perfect, it turned out, for turning radius on mountain roads where German trucks couldn't follow. Weight distribution, nearly 50/50ths. A quirk of the design. An accident of Probst's rushed calculations. The reason it could climb hills that stopped half-tracks. 4-wheel drive with selectable engagement. The Germans had seen this before. But not in something this small. Not in something this cheap. Not in something designed to be operated by farm boys with 3 weeks of training. On September 23, 1940, the first prototype, built by Bantam Car Company in Butler, Pennsylvania, completed its Army trials at Camp Holabird, Maryland. It climbed a 60-degree slope. It forded a stream 36 inches deep. It drove 100 miles over broken terrain without mechanical failure. Major General Charles M. Wesson watched the demonstration with arms crossed. "It's too light," he said. "It'll flip on rough terrain." It didn't flip. The engine will never survive combat conditions. The engine ran for 72 continuous hours in the next test. We can't possibly produce them fast enough to matter. This was the assessment that would haunt him. Because what Wesson didn't understand, what no military observer understood in 1940, was that America wasn't just designing a vehicle. America was designing a manufacturing system. Willis Overland won the primary contract in July 1941. Ford Motor Company received a secondary contract. The Army wanted 16,000 units. A massive order. Unprecedented. The largest military vehicle contract in American history. German intelligence received updated numbers in August 1941. USA Plant 16.000 Einheiten Willis MB bis Ende 1942. USA planned 16,000 units Willis MB by end of 1942. Colonel Friedrich von Mellenthin, intelligence officer attached to Panzerarmee Africa, reviewed the report in Berlin before his deployment. 16,000 reconnaissance vehicles, he noted in his diary. A significant number. But reconnaissance vehicles do not win wars. Reconnaissance vehicles do not stop panzers. The Americans are preparing to observe their defeat in comfort. The photographs that reached Berlin showed assembly lines at the Willis plant in Toledo. Orderly. Efficient. Typically American. Lots of space, lots of workers, moderate output. Nothing that concerned the officers planning Operation Barbarossa. Nothing that suggested the storm that was building. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. On December 11, Germany declared war on the United States. By December 15, Willis Overland had received authorization to expand production. Not to 16,000 units. Not to 20,000 units. To unlimited units. Whatever the Army needed. Whatever American industry could produce. The order simply read, maximum sustainable production. No ceiling. And that's when the numbers started to change. That's when the toy that made generals laugh became something else entirely. January 1942. Production, 1,842 units. February 1942. Production, 2,471 units. The Germans weren't worried yet. This was well within expected American capacity. Respectable but not threatening. The Volkswagen factory at Fallersleben was producing Kübelwagens at comparable rates. No cause for alarm. But something was happening in Toledo that wouldn't show up in intelligence reports for another 6 months. Something revolutionary. Something that would redefine not just this war, but industrial warfare itself. The assembly line was evolving. March 15, 1942. Somewhere in the Libyan desert. Lieutenant Hansato Barents stood beside his disabled SD, KFZ, 250 half-track, watching a dust plume approach from the east. British forces, likely. His company had been cut off during the Battle of Gazala, and now they waited, weapons ready, for capture or rescue. The vehicle that appeared through the heat shimmer wasn't British. It was American. A Jeep. The first one Barent had seen in person. 4 men, British long-range desert group, standing in and on a vehicle that seemed impossibly small. They didn't slow down. They didn't stop. They waved, actually waved, and disappeared into the dunes at a speed his half-track could never match in this terrain. Schnell, one of his men muttered. Fast. Zu schnell, Barent replied. Too fast. The encounter lasted 30 seconds. The report Barent filed after his capture lasted 3 pages. The American reconnaissance vehicle, he wrote, demonstrates mobility characteristics unexpected in a wheeled platform. Observed speed over broken terrain, approximately 40 kilometers per hour. German equivalent vehicles, 15 to 20 kilometers per hour over similar terrain. It was one report among thousands. It disappeared into the intelligence apparatus. But similar reports were arriving from every theater. Eastern Front, April 1942. Soviet forces using Lend-Lease jeeps penetrated German lines near Kharkov. The speed of their reconnaissance pushed information to Soviet commanders hours faster than traditional methods. German counterintelligence noted, enemy reconnaissance depth has increased significantly. New American vehicles observed. North Africa, June 1942. Erwin Rommel himself encountered a captured jeep during the Battle of Bir Hakeim. He ordered it examined. His officers reported back, crude construction, minimal armor, civilian-grade components. But it could traverse sand dunes that stopped German vehicles. It required minimal maintenance. And, most troubling, captured documents suggested the Americans were producing these in significant numbers. How significant? The intelligence estimate said maybe 20,000 by the end of 1942. Optimistic American propaganda, probably. The German Armaments Ministry knew what industrial production required. They knew the bottlenecks. They knew the limitations. 20,000 complex military vehicles in 1 year from a standing start? Highly unlikely. July 1942. Willis production, 10,428 units. Ford production, 7,322 units. Combined monthly production, 17,750 units. In 1 month. The reports reached Berlin in August. Someone had made an error. Perhaps monthly production had been confused with quarterly production. An investigation was ordered. The numbers were verified. The numbers were correct. General Thomas reviewed the production data with his staff. This suggests, he said carefully, annual production capacity exceeding 200,000 units. His chief analyst shook his head. Unmöglich. The specialized components alone, the transfer cases, the four-wheel drive systems, the engine blocks. There are perhaps a dozen factories in Germany capable of producing such components. The Americans cannot have built this capacity in 18 months. But they had. And they'd done it using a method the Germans hadn't considered, complete parts interchangeability. Every Jeep rolling off the Willis line in Toledo used identical components to every Jeep rolling off the Ford line in Detroit. Not similar components. Identical components. A carburetor from Toledo fit perfectly on an engine from Detroit. A transmission from a Tuesday morning production run was identical to a transmission from a Friday afternoon production run 3 months later. The Germans manufactured excellent vehicles. The Kübelwagen was beautifully engineered. Each component was precisely made. But each component was also slightly unique. A mechanic needed skill to fit parts. Adjustments were required. Tolerances had to be managed. The Americans had eliminated skill from the equation. A farm boy from Kansas with 2 weeks of training could replace a Jeep engine in 20 minutes using whatever engine was available in supply. No adjustments. No specialized tools. Bolts lined up. Parts fit. The vehicle ran. Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, designer of the Kübelwagen, reviewed captured Jeep components in August 1942 at the request of the Armaments Ministry. His report was grudging but honest. The American vehicle represents a triumph of manufacturing philosophy over engineering elegance. Individual components are crude. Tolerances are loose. Materials are inferior. But the systematic approach to interchangeability enables production rates we cannot match. This is not better engineering. This is better logistics. By September 1942, the numbers were undeniable. Monthly Jeep production, 22,557 units. More Jeeps were being produced each month than Germany produced Kübelwagens in an entire year. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, presented the updated intelligence to Hitler's staff in October 1942. The Americans, he reported, have now produced approximately 130,000 reconnaissance vehicles. They are equipping not just reconnaissance units, but communications units, medical units, artillery spotting units, and command units. Every American division deploying to theaters is arriving with hundreds of these vehicles. The mobility advantage is becoming significant. The response from Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel was predictable. Reconnaissance vehicles do not win battles. Tanks win battles. Artillery wins battles. Let the Americans waste resources on toys. But frontline reports told a different story. Tunisia, November 1942. American forces landed as part of Operation Torch. German observers noted something unprecedented: the speed of American command and control. Orders moved faster. Supply lines adapted faster. Artillery relocated faster. Everything moved faster. The reason, they discovered, was simple. American officers didn't walk. They didn't ride motorcycles. They didn't wait for staff cars. Every company commander had a jeep. Every battalion commander had a jeep. Colonels had jeeps. Generals had jeeps. The entire American command structure was mounted on 4 wheels and could move across any terrain at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. Major Fritz Bayerlein, Chief of Staff to Rommel, captured this in a December 1942 report. The American Army is not faster because their men are faster. They are faster because their information is faster. A forward observer spots our position. Within minutes, not hours, minutes, his commander knows. Within 15 minutes, artillery is redirecting. This is the Jeep effect. They have mechanized decision-making. And still, the numbers kept climbing. December 1942. Monthly production, 26,089 units. January 1943. Monthly production, 28,456 units. February 1943. Monthly production, 29,744 units. A German intelligence analyst calculated the total. By March 1943, the Americans had produced more than 300,000 Jeeps. 300,000. The number seemed impossible. It represented more motor vehicles than the entire Wehrmacht had deployed in the invasion of France. And these weren't civilian trucks pressed into military service. These were purpose-built military vehicles, all identical, all interchangeable, all capable of traversing terrain that stopped half-tracks. "We are not fighting an army," Colonel von Mellenthin wrote in his diary after Kasserine Pass. "We are fighting an industrial system that produces armies." The turning point in understanding came not from intelligence reports but from captured American training manuals. A document recovered near Kasserine in February 1943 was a maintenance guide for Jeep operators. It included something that shocked German analysts: a complete exploded diagram parts list showing every component, every bolt, every gasket. The guide indicated that every component could be ordered separately and would fit every Jeep regardless of where or when it was manufactured. The implications were staggering. An American unit could operate in complete isolation, thousands of miles from factories, and maintain their vehicles indefinitely using parts from any supply depot, any damaged vehicle, any source. The logistics chain had been simplified to the point where it was nearly unbreakable. A German panzer division required specialized parts shipped from specific factories. An American armored division required Jeep parts, just Jeep parts, universal and interchangeable. General Thomas assembled a team to investigate American production methods in March 1943. Their mission: determine how the Americans had achieved these production rates and whether Germany could replicate them. The answer they found would change nothing, because by the time they understood what America had built, it was already far too late. Oberstleutnant Fritz Ziegelmann, Chief of Operations for the 352nd Infantry Division, watched from his bunker as the invasion fleet materialized through the morning mist. Thousands of ships, tens of thousands of men, and within hours, thousands upon thousands of vehicles streaming from landing craft. The volume was incomprehensible. In the first 24 hours of D-Day, more than 2,000 Jeeps landed on French soil. 2,000. In one day. more than Germany had produced Kübelwagens in the previous 6 months. Ziegelmann recorded in his division log, enemy mobility assets exceed all intelligence estimates. Reconnaissance elements are operating 15 kilometers inland by 1400 hours. Our communications network cannot track movements. They are everywhere simultaneously. They were everywhere. Because America hadn't just brought jeeps. America had brought a doctrine built around the jeep. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley's command staff hit the beach with 47 jeeps in the first wave. Before infantry had secured the bluffs, before tanks had made it off the beach, Bradley had mobile command posts operating. Communications were flowing. Intelligence was moving. The entire invasion command structure was mounted and moving while German commanders were still trying to reach headquarters by field telephone. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, inspecting coastal defenses, was in La Roche-Guyon when the invasion began, 120 miles from the beaches. It took him 9 hours to return to his command post. His staff car was strafed twice. Roads were bombed. His communications were chaos. Bradley moved his command post 3 times on D-Day. Each move took 20 minutes. Load the jeeps. Drive. Unload. Operational. This was the gap that had opened. Not a gap in firepower. Not a gap in training. A gap in operational tempo. The Americans could think faster, communicate faster, adapt faster, not because their men were superior, but because their logistics were superior. And the logistics were superior because of that boxy little vehicle German generals had laughed at in 1940. By D+7, more than 15,000 jeeps were operating in Normandy. By D+30, more than 40,000. The numbers defied comprehension. German intelligence officers stopped trying to count them and simply reported enemy reconnaissance and transport vehicles. Innumerable. General der Panzertruppe Leo Gehr von Schweppenberg, commander of Panzer Group West, attempted a counterattack near Cannes on June 11, 1944. His operational order required coordination between 4 panzer divisions spread across 30 kilometers. The order was issued at 0600 hours. It reached subordinate units by 0900 hours via motorcycle couriers and field telephone. The attack began at 1400 hours, 8 hours after the initial order. American artillery had relocated to new positions by 1100 hours. Allied Tactical Air Command had updated target lists by 1200 hours. When German panzers advanced at 1400 hours, they advanced into preset kill zones. The attack failed within 2 hours. Von Schweppenberg's after-action report noted enemy response time to tactical developments, approximately 90 minutes. Our response time, approximately 8 hours. This disparity is unsustainable. The disparity was the jeep. Forward observers in jeeps. Artillery commanders in jeeps. Air liaison officers in jeeps. Courier runs that took German motorcycles 40 minutes took American jeeps 12 minutes. A command structure that moved at 60 miles per hour versus a command structure that moved at 15 miles per hour. But it wasn't just command and control. The jeep had become everything. Ambulance jeeps evacuated wounded from the front lines faster than any previous war. Survival rates for seriously wounded soldiers increased by 38% in European theaters compared to North Africa, primarily due to reduced evacuation time. A soldier wounded in Normandy reached a field hospital in an average of 47 minutes. In World War I, the average had been 8 hours. Artillery jeeps towed 37 mm anti-tank guns and 105 mm howitzers. A 6-jeep team could displace an entire artillery battery, 6 guns, ammunition, crew, and equipment, 3 miles in 11 minutes. German artillery units required trucks, half-tracks, and horses. Displacement time for equivalent German battery, 90 minutes minimum. Communication jeeps carried radio equipment and signal corps personnel. Before the jeep, frontline communications required laying telephone wire, a process that took hours and was vulnerable to artillery. Jeep-mounted radios provided instant communication across 30-mile ranges. American divisions maintained real-time communication networks that allowed battalion commanders to coordinate directly with air support, artillery, and adjacent units. Supply jeeps carried ammunition, rations, water, fuel, and equipment. A single jeep could carry 800 pounds of supplies over terrain that stopped trucks. During the Battle of the Bulge, surrounded American units at Bastogne were resupplied by jeeps that threaded through German positions under cover of darkness. Trucks would have been spotted. Half-tracks would have been heard. Jeeps, small and quiet, slipped through. General der Waffen-SS Sepp Dietrich, commanding the 6th Panzer Army during the Ardennes Offensive, reported to Berlin in December 1944, "The Americans have lost the initiative, but they have not lost mobility. Cut-off units maintain coordination. Encircled positions receive supplies. Their reconnaissance operates behind our lines with impunity. We capture their vehicles regularly. Yesterday, my headquarters captured 5 American reconnaissance vehicles within 2 kilometers of our position. This morning, they captured 3 more. The Americans treat these vehicles as disposable. They lose 10 and receive 20. We cannot replicate this system." He was right. By December 1944, monthly Jeep production had peaked at 28,133 units from Willis and Ford combined. Almost 30,000 every month. More than 1,000 per day. One Jeep every 73 seconds, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The math was brutal. Germany's total Kübelwagen production from 1940 to 1945 would reach approximately 50,000 units. America was producing that many Jeeps every 53 days. German prisoners of war, processed through camps in France and Belgium, reported a common observation: "We never saw the same American Jeep twice. They were endless. Every morning, new ones. Every evening, more. Where did they come from? How many factories did they have?" The answer: primarily 2. Willis Overland in Toledo, Ohio, and Ford in Detroit, Michigan. 2 factories outproducing the entire German automotive industry's military vehicle program. But production volume was only part of the story. The other part was distribution. By early 1945, Jeeps were operating on every continent except Antarctica, North Africa, Europe, Pacific Islands, China-Burma-India Theater, Alaska, Iceland. American forces deployed anywhere arrived with Jeeps. When Soviet forces advanced through Eastern Europe, they advanced partially on Lend-Lease Jeeps. Approximately 52,000 units shipped to the USSR between 1942 and 1945. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, commanding the First Belarusian Front, used a captured German Horch staff car early in the war. By 1944, he traveled exclusively in an American Jeep. When asked why, he reportedly said, "The German car is more comfortable. The American car is always running." Reliability. That was the other edge of the sword. German vehicles were engineered to precise tolerances. When maintained properly by skilled mechanics with proper parts, they were excellent. But war destroys maintenance schedules. Mechanics get killed. Supply lines break down. Parts become scarce. The Jeep was engineered to loose tolerances. Components had gaps. Clearances were wide. Nothing fit perfectly. But everything fit adequately, and adequate meant it ran. In mud. In sand. In snow. In tropical humidity. At 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the Sahara. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit in the Ardennes. It ran. Maintenance records from the U.S. Third Army in early 1945 showed average Jeep operational readiness at 92%. 92% of all Jeeps in inventory were mission-capable at any given time. Comparable figures for German half-tracks, 67%. For German trucks, 58%. This meant American units moved when ordered. German units moved when vehicles were available. Major General F.W. von Mellenthin, now Chief of Staff for Army Group G, wrote in his memoirs, "We began the war with superior vehicles and superior tactics. We ended the war facing an opponent whose vehicles were adequate and whose tactics were supported by endless logistics. Superiority without sustainability is a mirage. The Americans understood this. We did not." The final operations of the European War illustrated this completely. Operation Plunder, the crossing of the Rhine in March 1945, involved 1.2 million Allied soldiers. The logistical plan called for moving 140,000 vehicles across the river in 72 hours. The plan succeeded ahead of schedule. German defenders, many now on foot due to fuel shortages and vehicle breakdowns, watched as American mechanized columns simply drove past strong points, encircled positions, and maintained tempo that ground forces couldn't match. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding a regiment in the 21st Panzer Division, recalled the final weeks, "We would establish a defensive line. Within hours, American jeeps would appear behind us. Not tanks. Not infantry. Jeeps. With radios. Calling in artillery and airstrikes. By the time we repositioned to face them, their tanks had arrived. We were always reacting. They were always advancing. The jeep was the tip of their spear. Small, fast, everywhere. We could not stop them because we could not find them all." By VE Day, May 8, 1945, American forces in Europe operated approximately 250,000 jeeps. One jeep for every 24 soldiers. By comparison, the entire Wehrmacht at peak strength operated approximately 500,000 trucks for 5.5 million soldiers. One truck per 11 soldiers, most of them significantly less mobile than a jeep. The raw production numbers told the final story. From 1941 to 1945, Willis Overland and Ford produced 646,812 Jeeps for the U.S. military and Allied forces. 646,812. More than any other military vehicle in history up to that point. The toy that made generals laugh had become the most produced military vehicle of the war. It had become the symbol of American mobility. It had become, in the words of General George C. Marshall, America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. But the Germans had one more opportunity to truly understand what they'd been facing.